Episode 12, Blankets and Boundaries. I sat the mug on my roof, facing it away from us. Nearly 20 people had come to dinner tonight, and it was the perfect night for it. The air was light, the sky was clear, and everyone was in good spirits. We all sat around listening to stories of drunken mishaps. Then the conversation shifted to bad first dates. Jackson admitted to a time after his mom had just died, and his date just kept going on about how much she loved her mom. Before he knew it, he was crying large crocodile tears. She looked at him in horror, but he couldn't say why, or he'd really lose it. So he just sat there red-faced the rest of the night, with tears occasionally sneaking out because he couldn't get his mind off it. This, of course, was hilarious. "Did you ever hear from her again?" Dave asked. "No, I didn't even message her," Jackson replied. "Well, why the hell not? She would have understood," yelled Anna. "Cut my losses," he shrugged with a large smile. "Well, that's stupid," she said with a curled lip. "Want him to text her now, then?" Dave piped back in. "Dear female, you may not remember me, but I'm the guy that cried our entire date." "Oh, she'd remember," I said, laughing. We all laughed loudly, and Dave slapped my leg, repeating back to me, "She'd definitely remember." I looked over to Dave with a huge grin on my face. It was then that I noticed the unfamiliar figure standing in the darkness on the path. My expression changed quickly enough to make Dave jerk around as well, which alerted everyone else. It was a tall figure, broad, and dressed mostly in black. "Who the hell is that?" Dave yelled, jumping up at the ready. Some of the other men and I did too. "That's the guy that had the fire," John announced. "Denny, from yesterday." The stranger took the gap in conversation that followed as a chance to approach and speak up. "Hey, I just wanted to thank you guys for the blanket," he said. Most of the group turned to look at me. My eyes rolled into the back of my head. No way to deny that bit of charity now. He started to walk toward me. "Ugh," everyone else sat back down. "That was you, I take it?" Denny said. "It was everyone," I said flatly. "Denny," he said, waiting for me to reply. "Olivia," I replied, also flatly. "Thank you, Olivia." He smiled, giving way too much eye contact. I nodded. There was an awkward pause, exactly what I wanted, to make him uncomfortable so he wouldn't ask for more. It didn't work. "Listen," he said, pulling me away from the group to talk in a low voice. "I don't know you at all, but everyone in my area hates me." "I bet they do," I said with a stern look. "I came here last week, and I haven't eaten in days." Despite being a tall, fairly muscular man, his eyes grew watery. Admitting his desperation was clearly a breaking point for him. I stared up at him. I couldn't help but sympathize. That first week had been hell for me too. But I also couldn't let that sympathy show. Do you have any leftovers?" he continued. "Anything? Ivan probably has some groundhog giblets," I replied, gesturing Ivan's way. He made a face but was clearly considering it. I laughed. "What do you have to trade?" I said. "Anyone can eat, but everyone has to trade." Relief washed over his face as he reached in his pockets, looking for anything. He pulled out a small pocket knife. I immediately read sorrow on his face as he went to hand it to me. I took it anyway. "Do you have a bowl?" I asked. From the immediate panic that struck him, I knew he didn't. I turned to the group and yelled, "Anyone got a bowl?" Most had finished. He'd just have to cope with a used one. Ray went ahead and put a huge portion in his own bowl. I didn't think he overheard how hungry Denny was. I think he was just being a good host, and there was plenty left. Realizing he was joining us, Anna immediately lifted her arm and her blanket up, gesturing for him to curl up with her. I looked at him and saw that he was trying to pretend he didn't see her, so I pointed right at her. He grew rigid. "Hey, let me get under that blanket." Dave piped up, getting up to go her way, swaying like a caveman in a joking manner. "No way, you'll break my chair," she squealed, giggling, flinging back and kicking. "I'll break more than that," he laughed back. "Gross." "You can sit anywhere," I said to Denny. Of course, he waited until I sat, then sat on the ground next to me. The night continued, and any tension I had melted away. It still turned into exactly the night I wanted. Our bellies, filled with good food and good tea, fueled a hearty conversation. Even Denny led some of the stories. He seemed like a good person. That, or the food was just so good it made me like everything more than I should. I thought it would be just fine if he joined us in the future, so long as he had something to trade. A low rhythmic bass wafted in on the air. We all paused to listen for a while as the song of the makeshift mariachi band down the way played for anyone listening. I liked to imagine they all had pristine instruments and full regalia, but I knew it was probably sweaty, sun-crisped people just like us, using whatever they could get their hands on. Denny smiled at me, nodding to the music. It's funny the way people will segregate even in a totally free place. I had no doubt the group they played for were all non-English speakers. There were several bands in the area, and there almost seemed to be a schedule that kept them from overlapping. Some nights, the natives did music and sang high-pitched powwow songs. Sometimes they would move into English while singing, mostly about women who left and missing them. There was a jug band. Someone else would play harmonica. On occasion, Ray would get out his guitar, and John would drum along on a bucket, and they'd try to make a rhythm. This night really did turn out perfect, right down to the chill in the air and the warmth of the fire. Conversation sparked up again. After a while, a bit of charity washed over me, and I leaned to Denny to say something. He couldn't hear, so he leaned in far, resting his hand in my blanket pile. I paused, uneasy with this. "You can bring me something different tomorrow if you need your knife back," I said. He smiled. "Thank you." I didn't want to say. He pulled his lower half in closer and sat on my blanket nest. Smooth, I thought, putting me back on full guard. "But that knife was my brother's and—" "No need to explain," I said, knowing that he wanted to. It didn't feel right to ask him to move off my blanket, but it had shifted all my attention to the fact that he was a complete stranger again. Ray shared a story about camping up in Colorado, and this led to a whole new conversation. People shared survival tips for living in the woods. I became amused, wondering if I was the only one thinking how funny it was for a bunch of survivalists in the desert to be daydreaming about survival in the woods. This ended in an agreement to do a group pilgrimage to the Yemes for vacation someday. I'd gotten considerably cold and pulled a blanket up over me. I wasn't ready to go to bed yet. After readjusting, I couldn't help but hear Denny's teeth chattering. Unlike Anna, I was not going to snuggle up with this guy. But I did shift again and pull another blanket loose from under me. I tried not to look at him as I handed it to him, acting casual. He still leaned in, even closer. To say, "Thank you." Too much eye contact. Way too much eye contact. Everyone started to wind down around midnight. Carol was the first to go. After a while, it was only a handful of us. I felt trapped as long as he sat there on my blankets. But as crankiness set in, that concern faded, and I announced I was going to bed. Denny showed disappointment. I think he was nervous to be left alone, probably didn't want to go home. He got up off my blanket as I scooped him up. He went to hand me the one that was around him. I reached to take it, but was reminded how thin the one I'd given him yesterday was. I felt a pang of guilt. There was something about being next to the person who would be shivering all night that softened me up again. I told him he could bring it back tomorrow. It was a nice thick one, so it should keep him warm. I turned to go home when I noticed a silence fall over the surrounding neighborhoods. That silence came through like a wave as others noticed and fell quiet too. Then came a faint noise. A baby was crying. Well, shit. Episode 13. Don't Tell Me How to Wipe. In the beginning, no one took the would-be governor seriously as she outlined her vision of DeReg. As a firm constitutionalist, probably more than any local member of the Republican Party, they snuffed out her voice as a radical. The local TV stations tried to frame her as a kook, finding the strangest sound bites they could to air in ridicule of her. One of their favorites to repeat was a clip from a town hall in which she was asked about toilet paper in DeReg. She replied, "People have been defecating long before toilet paper." It went viral and national. In the comments of news articles about her, people would make jokes about not shaking her hand. Every time she was photographed holding something, new memes came out showing her explaining how to wipe with it. In the end, the publicity brought a lot of attention to her, which gave her an even bigger platform to speak from. After a while, the entire nation watched and hoped that her great social experiment would come to pass in this little corner of the Southwest. The rules were to be simple. The whole point of deregulating was to remove rules. However, it was generally agreed that it was no place for children. This would be the only time the government would enter the deregulation zone. With the Air Force Base in Albuquerque, DeReg served as excellent training grounds for personnel. In addition, there would be armed guards at the point of entry and regular patrols around it to prevent DeReg from becoming a giant drug factory. It was clearly outlined that no business could be run from DeReg. This was not a space for a big industry to move in, build a factory, and live tax-free. The guards would serve to report any hint of industry trying to capitalize on this tax-free space. Though it was generally understood that the residents wouldn't tolerate any abuse of the system either. Citizens were allowed to live there, claiming a space as large as they could protect. The trade for a life free of taxes was that they lived free of any government services. If a fire broke out, there was no one to stop it. If a crime was committed, you handled it yourself. There would be no courts to prosecute, no prison to protect society. It was well understood that the price to live on your own terms was to risk it every day in defense of it. With all the concerns circulating during the election, they thought it was more of a novelty than something that would ever happen. The homeless population was never enough to win her the state. But what no one saw coming was that it wasn't just the homeless who came out to vote. It was the artists, the ravers, partiers, and ex-cons, the libertarians, the sovereign citizens, and the off-gridders, the extremists of every category, the college kids who couldn't afford their student loans, the single dads paying more than they could afford in alimony and child support. It was every single person who lived on the poverty line. It was the people who had watched nothing but post-apocalyptic thrillers since 2010. It was even the social media stars who had pretended to enjoy living in tiny homes and refurbished vans for the past 14 years. All these people wanted to carve a piece of the land for themselves, or at least have that fallback. Governor Hale won by a tight margin, but she won, and DeReg was born.